So I remember opening the yellow book pages, and I was like, okay, what are my number one, what factory do I want to try to get a job at? And I just remember looking on there, and I'm like, where's actually location? I was like, holy crap. Like, I didn't realize, like, you know, San Clemente was all, you know, all those guys there. And I'm like, that's kind of far.
Yeah.
And then, like, Santa Barbara was all those guys, and Santa Cruz, I'm like, Santa Cruz is way too far. I needed something here. Like, this is where this guy's let me park my van. And the closest factory was Sharp Eye Surfboards in Point Loma. So I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I think that's those Brazilian guys. And then Rusty, I was like, oh, Rusty's a bigger name. Like, that's where either I got to get in with Rusty or Sharp Eye or one of whoever else is around here, right? And so I remember calling up Sharp Eye, and Marcio Zovi picked up, and he's like, they were renting they had this old shop kind of near the railroad tracks or whatever. And he was a pretty small operation, but he was in a small operation. He was definitely full-blown production, you know, pumping boards out. And I remember going there like, yeah, I'm a surfboard shaper. You need help shaping? And they're like, yeah, bring a board. So I brought the best board I had, and it was good, you know, for what it was good enough. And he's like, yeah, fuck, okay, you know what you're doing, cool. Yeah, we don't need a shaper. I need an airbrusher. Okay, I can airbrush, and, you know, I knew how to do artwork, whatever. And so I started out. He's like, you know, put your time in, and maybe you can, you know, if we're busy or whatever. Right now we're not as busy that we don't need any help, but like, yeah, you can build some of your own boards here too if you want. So, well, I didn't know anybody, but I had all my brother's friends and all my friends back home were like, dude, well, you know, we want to get some boards this summer, but I'm in California, man. Sorry, can't do it. So I was like, maybe I can build a bunch of boards and then drive back and sell them at the end of summer. So I get a job, and it was like, I want to say I was there for 3 days, and there was his airbrusher that was there. His name's Tom Curtis. I don't know if you heard of him, TC. He's like an old school legendary airbrusher, incredible pin liner. I was working. He used to be sponsored by GNS back in the day as like a team rider. He's worked, but he was one of the main guys at Diamond Glasson. And he's like, dude, I hear Diamond might be looking for an airbrusher. Oh, I'm looking for shaping work, man. I don't want to airbrush. I'm not an airbrusher or whatever, but I can do it. And then through the grapevine, Marcio tipped me off. Marcio kind of took me under his wing, and I owe Marcio a lot of credit. He was more like a semi-father figure at the time. Not father figure, but like treated me more like a, you know, adopted kid I got to look out for, right? So he was like, hey, I hear there's a new brand starting up. There's a guy down the street who's got a shop, Stony, and he's going to be building some brand called AKA Surfboards. And I don't even know what year that was. And they need a shaper. I don't know. Go talk to them. So the guy Stony's like, they're calling me East Coast because I was living in my van. I didn't know anybody. And they're like, hey, East Coast, tell you what. You come in here. The room will be open. You shape 3 boards before 11 a.m. If they're good enough, you got the job. Okay, you know, there's all hand shaping, right? I never touched a computer shape. And I go in there, and my first day, I'm like, I got to do a good job. I got there, like, in the dark. They had the blanks there. They just said just 3 stock boards, whatever. And I didn't even know the guys I didn't know anything about the brand. I was dealing with the factory manager or the guy who ran the glass shop. So I shaped the boards, did my good enough job. 11 a.m., okay, finish off, mark the fins. The guy comes over, he's like, okay, kid, shoot, you can shape. You got the job. Come in tomorrow. We're going to do, you can do 3 a day. If you can do 3 a day, you got the job. Hand shaping 3 a day. You know, good shapers were doing them in like 45 minutes to an hour, which was fast. I think I was taking me like 2 hours at the time. So I'm like, I was trying to do a perfect job. So I was like, okay, I need 6 hours. So I got to get in here at like 5 or whatever it was. And the second day I got in super early, did my 3 boards, got paid. It was the same thing, like $45 a board. I'm like, okay, dude, I'm in San Diego making $130 a day by 11 a.m.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Then I went to Sharp Eye, do a couple rail airbrushes, whatever. And then the next day, or they're like, oh, come by next week. We got to get blanks. Because, blanks run out, and that's the thing you don't really think about. And then something happened. My van broke down or something. I didn't have a car at the moment, and I didn't have my tools were all in the van. And so I was like, look, I can't make it into work because I can't get, like, my tools are all, and he's like, dude, just get a ride, get in there. There's tools in there. Okay. And meanwhile, I go to Sharp Eye first. I think I had a little locker or something. I put my shoes, got my mask, a couple things, or let me leave some things there. And I walked down the street to this guy Stoney's. And meanwhile, TC was the guy I was kind of like talking to, like who's kind of one of my only friends, honestly. But I had just gotten here, and I go in the shaping room, and I'm a little late. And Stoney's like, look, dude, there's a planer in there. There's tools in there. Just use whatever's in there. Get the boards done, but get out of there by 11. What's this like rush for 11? Well, it's just another shaper's room. So like he comes in at 11. He's going to be pissed if you're in there. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try my best. Maybe I can only do like 1 or 2 today. So I start. I'm in there. And I'm telling you, I'm like 17 years old. And I'm in here and don't know anybody. And I'm hand shaping these boards. And I'm getting paid. I'm all excited. This is like my dream situation. And it was like 7 a.m. The door bursts open. And there's this old, long hair, guy's got no shirt on, just got done surfing the cliffs or whatever. And he comes in, he's like, who the fuck are you? And are you using my planer? And I have no idea who this guy is. I'd never seen him in my life. Don't know anything about names, about local people here. And he just shoves me against the wall, grips the planer out of my hand. He's like, are you that East Coast kid here? Boy, you're lucky. I ought to whoop your ass right now. Get the fuck out of here. And he just lights me up. And I'm like, look, man, I just got a job here. This is Stoney. He's like, Stoney hired you? He's going to, what are you're my replacement? I'm like, I don't need this. And all of a sudden, like, somebody comes in, something happens, and I don't know, he was having a bad morning.
Apparently.
And he ends up lighting me up and basically straight up wants to fight me. And I'm like, who is this guy? And the glassers all come out. Everybody's at the shop comes out. And they're all friends with him. And they're like, oh, dude, he's going to get his ass whooped. And it's funny. I've never really told this story too much. I don't want to name drop too much, but it's worth saying. It's John Holly. He's like an old school Sunset Cliffs guy. He's gnarly. And I'm like, no disrespect to you, but I'm not fighting you, man. It's 7 a.m. I just here working, man. I didn't know these are your tools. The guy told me to use them. I'm out of here, man. And he's like, he was like fully like just in my face, shoved me against the wall. Like, look, kid, you're lucky I don't whoop your ass right now. You don't ever touch somebody else's tools. You don't ever fucking come into somebody else's room unless you know who it is. It's ridiculous that they even allowed you in here. You better not be copying my templates and, the whole thing. So like people, and I was like, damn, this is rough out here. Yeah. You know what? I don't need this. So I walked back to Sharp Eye. I'm like, on the alleyway or whatever, like kind of the news kind of go around and they're like, dude, heard old man Allie almost whooped your ass. And like everyone's joking me. And I'm like, fuck, man, like I don't have any friends here. This is fucking bullshit. Like you won't even let me shape. You got me airbrushing and these other guys trying to beat me up. I finally got a job shaping. They said it was good enough. And TC was like, look, man, this thing isn't going to end. Like, you got to, like, put your time in, man. It just is what it is. But I told you, Diamond's looking for an airbrusher. He said, call him up. The owner's name is Bob Bocci. So he gives me his number. I call it Bob Bocci and said, hey, man, I hear you guys looking for airbrush. He's like, can you do it? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm the airbrusher over at Sharp Eye. Which was not a lie, but for, like, a week.
Right.
So he goes, killer, come on over, kid. You got the job. I got this other airbrusher who's a nightmare I'm dealing with right now, who's actually, I've turned to really good friends. Jeffrey Myers is his name. He's just another one of the best airbrushers around this kind of area, in my opinion. He's like, he goes and surfs all the time. He barely does what I ask him to do, and I'm hiring you to start a fire under his butt. I'm like, great. I'm like, just like pissing people off kind of thing. And I'm just trying to survive at this point. I'm living in my van. Okay. And so I go over to Diamond, I get the job airbrushing. They're like, look, dude, you're good enough, but like you're really slow. Like we need to be doing some numbers here. Like you need to be able to airbrush 20 boards in a day. I'm like, dude, I can't. I'm a shaper, not an airbrusher. Yeah, whatever, kid. So finally, the Myers guy, Jeff Myers, is a good friend of mine. He's a super classic guy, but he's like, look, kid, you know, there's unlimited boards here. And right then was when Bill Johnson just won the world title. Okay. So Bill Johnson.
With CJ?
With CJ. But he was right for under Rusty, but they were in the building next door, which was all the in-house shapers, right? Which was Bill Johnson, Rick Hammond, Terry Goldsmith, all those guys, and Rusty. And I'm at Diamond, which is the glass shop. And I'm just getting there, right? And I'm like, whoa, this place is cool. They had all the boards, and I remember they were doing a bunch of tow boards for Flea, because they sponsored Flea back in the day.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So I had this influence of like the Mavericks guys are the real deal guys. So I'm in here airbrushing all their guns and their tow boards. And I was like, just, you know, fascinated by it. Just like, dude, I've never seen a tow board in my life. And this was when like Flea was in his peak or prime. I was like, dude, I got to go to Mavericks one day and check that out. Like that was like where my mindset was at. And I was like, how am I going to pull this off, man? I'm not fast enough to be an airbrusher. They're going to fire me. I just don't want to get fired. And I just want to get enough respect to be able to work here. Right. And that was like always the goal. And I kind of like never worried about my own brand at the time. It was more just, so then they were like, look, kid, you really want to shape some boards? You can shape your own brand on the weekends. And then Myers actually gave me a key and the alarm code to the factory. Okay. Which I was not, he should not have done that to me. So I started parking my van in the back, sleeping there. If totally like without really permission.
Yeah.
A couple of the laminators came in. There was a guy, Knuckles. There was a couple of these guys who were like all pretty legendary San Diego board builders. And they're like, dude, you know, like this kid's cool. He's sleeping in his van. Just goes surfs blacks all day and comes in here and works. And one of the guys saw a couple of my first boards and they're like, holy crap, like you actually can kind of shape? Like, dude, like show the guys that you can shape. Like screw airbrushing. You're way too slow at airbrushing anyways. I'm like, I'm not good enough to be shaping for you guys. I know my place now. I almost got beat up by Holly down the street. And they're like, wait, what?
We heard about that.
They're like, what? Holly? And I'm like, I don't even know the guy. I don't know. Just ran into this guy. He was having a bad day. He wanted to fight me. I was using his planer. And they're like, whoa, what? I'm like, oh, dude, you know Holly works here too. Oh, no. And I'm like, you know Holly's brother-in-law's with the owner, Bob Ochi? They're brothers. I'm like, I'm going to get fired here too. I got to start going back to Sharp Eye and being friends with those guys because I'm definitely getting fired here. I'm not trying to get beat up by this guy at the time. And so meanwhile, I'm like, I'm not telling anybody about this anymore. I'm not bringing this up. I'm going to get fired everywhere I go. And so all the guys just thought it was hilarious. And they I feel like they were looking out for me because of that. And then there was there's a guy, Bob Yinger. I don't know if you've heard of Bob Yinger. So Bob Yinger was shaping there at the time too, or had just left and moved back to the East Coast. So the shaping room that I was using was Yinger's old room, which at the time I had never met him. He's a Florida guy. He ended up moving to the Outer Banks and became one of the main shapers at Wave Riding Vehicles.
Yeah.
So now years later, we were actually really close friends and a lot of funny stories. But like, he was out shaping, and I remember like, you know, you just as a little kid, you have these envisions and you put everybody on these pedestals. Well, still to me, it was like, that's just another East Coast shaper. The big dogs is like Rusty and them. In the in-house guys, those are the guys that like I gotta still learn, you know. And even Marcio at the time, like I don't know, he wasn't, you know, he was still just trying to make a living and run a business, and you know, he definitely didn't have the clout that he has now. And Rusty and them were definitely like the biggest guys in San Diego. So my goal back then was still I'm just trying to learn how to do it, and then it was like I was just trying to learn how to like, I knew how to shape. I had been shaping for, you know, not that long, but in my life, it was the only job I've ever done. So I just wanted to like get enough respect from the other board builders to know like, hey, this kid can kind of, you know, belongs here a little bit, you know? So I'm putting my time in, just waiting the day that Holly shows up to beat me up or I get fired. And right around then, Bill Johnson won the title with CJ and bailed. And he started his own brand. And Hobgood ended up jumping ship with and followed Bill Johnson. So that summer, they just won the world title. So they were cranking. They were cranking a lot of boards. And I remember Bob Ochikamp was like, dude, they need help shaping. Do you know how to do computer shapes? I don't know. I'm sure I could learn if they teach me, but do they really want to teach me? Probably not. And he's like, look, let me just bring one over here, get like a bad cut, finish it off the best you can, and we'll see what they say. And back then I was like, when I thought finishing good it was like the actual finish. So I had wet and dry sandpaper on the rails. I mean, like, I didn't know what level they were talking about. So I took all weekend. I had the whole thing was like, you could have done the best tent job ever on this thing. String was perfect. Nose and tail were perfect. Everything was as good as I could do it. And took it over and they're like, Jesus, kid, like, you don't need to finish it this tight, but like, you know, your rails are even, everything's done. It's not real. It's not our rail. You need to learn how to do our rail and our things. But, so he takes me, introduces me to Rusty, and Rusty's like, look, man, we just need help at the moment. We'll give you some work, but Rick Hammond needs to oversee all of them. Rick Hammond was kind of like, oh, great. You know, looking back, they probably, you know, paid him a little bit to oversee or whatever.
Sure.
I didn't know that at the time, so I thought it was just being another nuisance to somebody else.
Yeah. I'm just going to turn this slightly. Okay.
All good. So that was kind of my whole, like, initial start in, like, the actual, I guess you could say, like, seeing the bigger picture of production, right? Like real production. And I think that first summer I did like 100 boards with them. Okay. And Rick Hammond kind of, not that he coached me, but he touched up my imperfections or things that were wrong. I needed to learn tuck better. I needed to learn this, that, and the other. And would, you know, would kind of go over each one for me. And I really appreciated that a lot. And Rick Hammond actually kind of was someone that definitely didn't, 100% I wouldn't consider him a mentor whatsoever. He was just a guy that I was able to watch a little bit, right? So I go back to Sharp Eye and I say, dude, I'm at Diamond I'm shaping Rusties. He's like, really? Well, fuck. We need some help too. So he had like a little side brand called Bunker. It was like a surf shop. He's like, you can do the bunker boards. And I'm like, I don't want to do bunker boards, dude. And I'm making money. I'm making money over Diamond. I'm making like, you know, whatever it was. I'd airbrush in the mornings. I'd shape a little bit in the afternoons, doing some of my own boards. And the whole time I'm building my own brand. And Clark Foam had not gone out of business yet. It was like, end up being that like shortly afterwards. So he let me do that. And then occasionally, and then they got busy. And it was like, okay, cool, kid. You can shape here. Do some boards, airbrush some boards. So that by the end of that summer, I was shaping and airbrushing at both Diamond and Sharp Eye.